clicking that to record. So as I said, we will be recording this, and we will be putting a full copy of that recording up on our YouTube channel, so that if anybody wants to revisit what we're talking about this evening, then you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to go and watch it over again, or if you've got other people who you know wanted to be here tonight and couldn't make it, you can direct them over to there, and they'll be able to watch it as if they were here. So we're here tonight to hear about how we can make sure that our grant applications, which are becoming more and more important to all of us, can be made to stand the best possible chance of success. And our speaker tonight is Graham Phillips, who some of you I know have already had contact with and come across. And he's a policy and projects officer, many years experience with the external funding team at Norfolk County Council. So I know you'd rather listen to Graham than you listen to me, so I will now pass you up to Graham, and it's all the floor's all yours, Graham. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction, Peter. And I'm just going to reiterate apologies to everyone. My work laptop died completely 5 minutes before I was due to give this, so I've had to switch into my home studio where I've got a personal laptop all embedded in. As Peter said, my role within the council, just as a bit of a context, is to support internal departments and our external delivery partners and others in accessing funding and to hopefully increase the chances of success of your funding applications. And that's what we're going to go through this evening. We're going to walk our way through funding and building an application. And I think the first thing to state is that I'm going to ask you to slightly change the way you think about funding throughout this next hour completely. The way funders are appraising projects and the way they are looking for projects has changed over the last few years. And hopefully what this evening is going to do is going to show you not only how to increase the success of your grants, but at the same time open up the number of potential funding streams that are available to you for your project, no matter what the size. So let's start at the beginning. I think the first place to start is that your funding application is the end of a process. It's the last stage in a process of project development. And so your grant applications are as much about what happens prior to you writing that application as it does to writing the application itself. And so the first thing I'm going to suggest is that when you have a concept for a project right at the very beginning, or as soon as possible, if you come out of this, think that's a really good way of doing this, is to have a folder, either physical or virtual, in which you put everything we're going to talk about today into that folder. And the idea of that is that as you work through your project development from concept through to project application, the actual application itself is the writing of the application. What we're trying to do is enable you to be able to just cut and paste from that folder into any application form. And so the application itself, in an era in which, as no doubt you've all noticed, in an era in which the deadlines for submitting an application are getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and sometimes you only have 3 or 4 weeks in which to submit an application. And oftentimes I come across a lot of even our internal departments who go, we've only got 4 weeks and we have to write a whole application. So one of the things we're going to talk through tonight is how to ameliorate that, if you like. And the way you start is by having that folder which you use almost as a brain dump of all the information, however relevant you think it might be, but all the information that's related to that project. And so at the end, when you come to filling out the application, it's a couple of hours work. You can cut and paste specific pieces from that folder into the application itself. And so instead of an application form taking, 3 or 4 days or a week to put together in the midst of you trying to develop your project, it really is. You can just sit down in the morning and go, bam, that's done. So the folder is the key opening piece. And as soon as you have an idea for a project, I would suggest that you start a folder. And the idea, in the ideal world, for those of you who are going to submit more than one grant application, the ideal world, you would have a series of these folders, either analog folders or digital folders, sitting on a shelf, waiting for the right funding stream to come along. And so those folders then enable you to say, oh, look, we can bid for this funding because we've actually done most of the work already. And then as the funding streams come up, and even if they're tight and you've got 3 or 4 funding streams to put together in a space of, say, a month or 6 weeks, this enables you to actually achieve that. So that's the first step I'm going to suggest you do in order of making your grant applications much more successful. Do not chase the funding, I think, is the mantra here. Build the projects and then wait for the funding to come along, knowing that it's okay, because you can just submit the application the following day or the next day or the day after that. So let's start with the actual application itself then. I appraise a lot of projects. I appraise this year so far. I've probably appraised 50 this year. I write business cases for nigh on 100 projects a year. I've got 30 or 40 projects that I'm supporting currently. So, and I work with a lot of funders. And so I'm coming this evening to speak to you as someone who appraises projects and understands how appraisers think. And that's what you need to be able to do. Your grant application is, as well as being an ask for funding, your grant application is a sales pitch. It's a sales pitch about you, your organization, your project, and the community in which you live. And so we have to build a sales pitch within an application form that's provided to you by the funder. Sometimes you're very word limited. You've got 100 words or 1,000 words or whatever it is. And hopefully today we'll be able to go through some of the stuff that will enable you to craft that application. So the first thing that funder asks you, once you get beyond the, what's your name, what's your organization, are you constituted, all that stuff that they ask you at the beginning, they're going to ask you to describe your project. And the biggest mistake that I see as an appraiser is a description of a project that is incomplete and doesn't tell the whole story, and is really a narrative about all the stuff that goes on around the project. And as an appraiser, I read this stuff and I look at it and I'm 2 paragraphs in and I still don't know what your project is about. And what you're trying to do from the very first sentence of that application form is encourage an appraiser to read the next sentence and the next paragraph and then to read the next section. Because what you want, your relationship with the appraiser and with the funder, is you want them to feel comfortable and trustworthy about giving you the funding. And so right from the beginning, you want to start talking about your project specifically. For example, if you're building a playground in a community and you're looking for funding to put in some equipment, what the project wants to know is they want to know what about that equipment is. A sentence about the community itself in the opening piece is probably enough. You can go into much more detail later on in the application form, but talk about your project. I saw one application for funding for a roundabout in which they said, we want to build a roundabout. And then they went into about 4 paragraphs of the housing development that was going on around it, and the road network, and all this other stuff. And I was 4 paragraphs in and still didn't know where and why they were going to put the roundabout in. So the key piece about that description is that description should be about your project. Now, you can mention the community within which it sits, or if you're dealing with a social issue and you're trying to do things about employment, you can talk about the rationale in a short space of time, so that you lead the appraiser into a mindset where they understand your project, and then they're going to go into much more detail. And that's how you should structure it. The other piece about the project description, and this is actually about your whole application, is it should be very data-driven and evidence-driven right from the beginning. It used to be, for those of you who've been writing funding applications for a while, it used to be that what appraisers and what funders wanted to see was a narrative about your project. Unfortunately, with funding cuts to government and with the huge amount of applications that funding streams and funders are now receiving, they're triaging the way they look at applications, partly by the use of data. Those applications that are evidence and data heavy, as opposed to narrative heavy, will stand a lot more chance of being successful in the modern era of how funders look at projects. So hopefully that little piece just makes sense, because we're going to talk about evidence in a couple of minutes. But every statement that you make, even in the opening piece, every allegation, every statement, every action needs to be backed up by evidence at some point in that application form. And what you don't want to happen is halfway through the application, you suddenly make a statement or say, we're going to do this, or our partners are going to do this, without having led the appraiser into that from the project description right at the beginning. So you don't want to blindside the appraiser, is what I'm trying to say, halfway through the application and go, wait a minute, where did that come from? They didn't mention this partner at the beginning. They didn't mention that this was going to happen early on, and now halfway through the application they tell me they've got a partner who's going to deliver this. Appraisers work by scanning the initial grant application and in effect putting them into 2 piles. One of which is, actually that looks kind of interesting, I'm going to have a deeper look at that. And the other pile is, yeah, I don't think that meets what we want to see as a funder. And so obviously you don't want to be in that second one, you want to be in the first pile. And so right from the very, very beginning, what you want to do is draw that appraiser in to your project. Understanding that an appraiser knows nothing about you as the applicant or your organization or about your community or about Norfolk, actually. So you need to be very clear and very succinct, and the language that you use is just as important. We go back to that thing that right from the very beginning, you want to draw the appraiser in. And one way you do that is by A, mirroring the language that they've used in the guidance that they provided or in the precursor to the application form. You mirror their language back to them, and you use short sentences as opposed to long paragraphs or long sentences within paragraphs. If you have a sentence that has more than a couple of commas in it, it's too long for an appraiser. They like to see snappy, short things that are really detailed and have punch. And so every sentence in your description needs to have a meaning tied to that sentence. They don't want to see you straying from, in the project description, they don't want to see you straying from what is it you are going to do, because that's the first thing they want to know is What is it you are going to do as an applicant? So you would start off by saying, let's call it the project, the XXX project, for example. Your opening piece might be, the XXX project will deliver whatever it is that the funder's looking for. The XXX project, if we go to a playground, will deliver a new green space within the community of Hailsham, Norfolk, in order to provide young children and their parents with recreational space. That tells the appraiser straight away what it is that you want to do. So that should be your opening piece. What is it that we're going to do? We are going to deliver. Not we will deliver if we get funding, not we would like to deliver, not we aim to deliver. You will deliver this, because now you're talking in the active voice, and you're telling an appraiser that we've researched what you want as a funder. We've looked at your agenda. We've looked at the guidance you've offered. We know the kinds of things you're looking for. And do you know what, appraiser? This is the project you're looking for, because this will deliver exactly what you have said you're going to ask for. And so your project description should be right clear from the outset. This is what we will deliver. The next piece down, and that shouldn't be more than 3 or 4 sentences in reality. The next piece down is going to be, how are you going to deliver this? You're going to expand on the how, and the what, and the whys in a bit later. But right from the beginning, you're going to say, this is what we're going to deliver it. This is how we're going to deliver it. So in order to make this easier for you, I suppose if you start from, what does success look like as your opening piece? Think of it that way. Success looks like a playground that is full of children who are undertaking exercise and recreational activities with their parents. And that's what you're going to deliver. You're going to deliver a playground that does that. That's your what is the impact of what you want to do? That should be the first sentence in that folder that you put together. This is what success looks like for this project. The next piece down is going to be, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So you've described exactly what you're going to do. You've said how we're going to do it. We are going to deliver this through, contracting with a procured contractor who's going to build this green space, for example. The next question an appraiser is going to ask of you is, well, why are you doing this? What's the rationale for me wanting to fund this project? So the first thing in this folder is, what does success look like? The second question that you need to answer is, what is the problem you are trying to solve? And if you've done your research, that problem you're trying to solve is the same problem that the funder is looking to see if it can be solved. And that's why you want to mirror their language back to them. Because a funder has certain issues that they would like to see resolved. And you're coming along going, yes, I can deliver the answer to what you see as the problem, because we see it as the same problem, and we have the solution to this problem. And so now you have an appraiser. Yes. I'm going to read, I'll come back to the chat questions afterwards. Yes. Now you have an appraiser who understands what their funder, what they are looking for as a funder, and they have this set of criteria that says what we are looking for are projects that solve this problem and that do that this way, or in a way we haven't thought of before. So now you are reflecting that back to them. You're going, this is what we want to do. We want to do this because we know you're looking for projects like this, and we're solving the problem that you want to see solved. So what does success look like? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? within this project. That's your opening description, if you like, of your project. That's the piece that says, this is what we are going to do, and this is why we're going to do it. From then on, you're now going to get, they're going to ask you all these other questions like when, where, and we're going to cover that right now. So, why are you going to do this? You can expand on that now in the next piece. And very often they ask you for a rationale for delivering your project, or why do you want to deliver this? This is where your evidence comes in. This is where that data that you've collected about your project. This is where you're going to use evidence instead of a narrative. So let's say you are building this playground. I don't know why I picked a playground tonight. It changes every time I deliver one of these. The project actually changes completely. So, but tonight it's a playground. So what does a playground deliver for your community? Well, it delivers recreational exercise, but it also solves a number of other issues. It solves, it can help resolve obesity in young children by providing them with exercise. It can support their health and well-being across the board. That includes their mental health. It provides a gathering space for young parents or parents of young children. It's been a long time since my children grew up and left home, so I'm going to assume that the playground is used by young children primarily. So it solves a number of issues, and you should be collecting evidence about those issues that you can then use in the why do we want to solve. We want to build a playground because it has been, there is evidence to show that playgrounds help reduce obesity in young children. Great. So you need to be collecting evidence either from a national data source or a local data source. And I would recommend it's not completely covering everything, but it covers a lot of things, is Norfolk Insights, which is our database of evidence about communities and demographics. So we want to build a playground because it is a gathering space. It's a green space in the current era of everything moving to a greener net zero economy. It provides us with green usable space within the community. That also helps health and well-being because there is a direct link between the environment and health and well-being. It helps community cohesion by giving a space where this cohort of young parents and children can socialize, and that absolutely helps community cohesion. And so all of these things require evidence. And evidence is probably the next hardest piece within an application. Where do I find evidence of employment, for example? Let's say you're doing an employment project and you want to see more people in your community have access to employment and training opportunities. Okay, so you need evidence about the number of people who are unemployed or employed in Norfolk or in your community. You should probably find then evidence about the impact of unemployment on a community. 35% of communities that have high levels of unemployment are deprived. 25% of people seeking to move from unemployment to employment are vulnerable or have disabilities. You should have that evidence. So that evidence you collect in that folder right at the beginning. So you can, and the advantage of using that folder to collect evidence is you don't have to do it all at once. Unlike an application form, you can say, okay, so I'm going to build this folder over a period of time. I'm going to look up the evidence. I've got 2 hours a week in my schedule in which I can find time to go find the evidence that supports why I want to do this. So you might want to say, for example, if we go back to the playground, in rural, I'm just going to pick numbers out of the air. This is absolutely not a statistic. In rural communities, 45% of children under the age of 17 are obese. That's not good for the community, it's not good for the children, it's not good for their parents, it's actually not good for their educational attainment and all sorts of other things. There are all sorts of things linked into that playground that become the outcomes that you're looking for across the board. What does success look like is you built a playground and people are using it. The outcomes that come out of that are things such as health and well-being, anti-obesity, better community cohesion, and you should find evidence about those outcomes. Now, if you have a problem with finding evidence, I'm sure Peter will tell you, you can email me. My role is to help all of you, with your grant applications and to help find the evidence and to find partners who might hold that evidence for you. Because that's the next question from that is, where is all this evidence? So there's national evidence on all sorts of things that the government produces on their demographic surveys. If you're in an organization, you probably hold a lot of that evidence within your council, within your parish council. You hold a lot of evidence about the communities in which you live. So use that evidence. The advantage of that you have if you have submitted applications and delivered funding applications is you have a track record of success in delivering projects. And having a track record of success helps that appraiser feel comfortable about offering you the money. And so if you say, we have delivered projects before, and those projects have shown that there is both a need and a demand for whatever it is you want to do, and we delivered those projects successfully, now you have done three things by using your track record. You've shown evidence of need and demand, and you've showed, that's two, one is of need, one is of demand, and you've shown evidence of your track record. All of those help an appraiser feel much more comfortable about giving you the money. And that's the key piece. So need and demand are two different things. So if you're going to build a playground, why do you need a playground? Well, you might need a playground because there are no playgrounds within 15 miles of your community, and young parents and their children have to travel to find recreational space that is suitable. That's need. The demand piece is where you have spoken to those young parents and they said, we would absolutely like to see a playground in our community. So your need piece is about the evidence of why you want to build the playground. The demand piece is to show that your community actually wants that playground. And you can do that demand piece through surveys. You can do that demand piece through observational habits and through knowledge by speaking to parents. And they're telling you we have to drive 15 or 20 miles or however far it is to find a playground with all the equipment that we're looking for our two young children. And the need piece, it leads you into the demand piece, because the need piece provides you with a cohort that is going to populate that playground in the long run. So that's your cohort of individuals. And what you want to show is that you have engaged with those people and they have then said, this is what we would like to see. You've established the need through data and evidence, and now you have shown that you have engaged with your users of whatever project is you're going to do, and those users want to see your project. So you should articulate that engagement within your rationale about, so your rationale is why, and the why is there is both need and demand for this project. If you can provide evidence of need and provide evidence of demand, you've got the rationale for your project there. Now, some funders come out and ask you why, and some ask for what's the rationale for your project. They're both the same thing. It's need and demand. And evidence of both, not a narrative, evidence. You can literally bullet point the evidence. We want to build this playground because 45% of children in rural areas suffer from obesity. We want to build this playground because there is no playground within 15 or 20 miles. We want to build this playground because there is a lack of green space within the community that is accessible. We want, that's just bullet points. And feel free to bullet point a list of needs and demands, separate them out into need and separate them out into demand. A lot of funders these days are going to ask you about that engagement piece with your community. Have you engaged with the potential users of this community? And you're going to be able to say, yes, we have, because the demand piece that you have now spoken to those young mothers, for example, or those young fathers, that's your engagement. The next piece you want to explain as part of that is your communication strategy with the group of people that's going to use it. And that communication strategy should be relevant to that group of people. So, for example, if you are working on an employment project for very vulnerable people in your community, and I have actually seen this in an application this year, we want to engage with the hard-to-reach people who are unemployed within our community and provide them with training opportunities so that they move closer to the labor market. Great, we like that, lovely. How are they going to know about your offer? Well, we're going to do the offer all digitally. We're going to do the offer on social media, and we're going to put it on our Facebook page, and we're going to put it on our website. Great. How many of the very vulnerable people who you are aiming to work with have 24/7 internet access, have access to social media? How many of them are going to see the posts you put on Facebook, because there are algorithms in? So this is as an appraiser. These are questions I actually asked. You've got an all digital strategy for a group of people that are potentially not all digitally aware or not all digitally enabled because of funding or finances or their socioeconomic status or their disability or whatever. So now you've got a communication strategy that is not relevant to the users of your group. So now automatically, I think as an appraiser, you know what? They've not really thought about this as a project. So if they've not thought about this within their project, what other things have they not thought about? So as an appraiser now, I'm going to go deeper into that application form to see what else you've not thought about. So it's little things like that. But that communication strategy is really key to how do people know about it? How are they going to access your project? How are they going to learn about it? Who do they contact if they want more information? All that kind of stuff you need to think about, and you can throw that into your folder at the very beginning. Does this all make sense so far? I just want to make sure I'm keeping in track with what you want to see as a group of individuals who are submitting grant applications. So you've got your project, you've got your description that's nice and succinct. You found the evidence that backs up every statement you've made about everything you're going to do. You've got evidence of need, you've got evidence of demand, you've got a good communication strategy. So the next piece then is you need to wrap that up in your budget. Because as an appraiser, when you say, as a grant applicant, we are going to undertake 3 workshops across a period of, say, 3 weeks. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do when I get to your budget piece is I'm going to look at your budget and see if you've allocated lines within your budget for those 3 workshops. Your budget is the piece that links what you want to do with your outcomes that you're going to deliver. Your budget is what links how you're going to show progress within your project with the outcomes that you've said you're going to deliver. So your budget needs to reflect every action you take should have a piece of evidence that sits behind why you're going to do this. Why are you going to do workshops virtually, for example? So you say, we're going to deliver virtual workshops. Why are you going to deliver virtual workshops? I know as an appraiser why you want to deliver virtual workshops. But what I want to know is, do you know why you're going to deliver virtual workshops? Because if you just say we're going to deliver workshops, virtual workshops, because everyone is delivering virtual workshops, Fine. But why virtual? Why are you not doing in-person work? And that might be, for example, that the users that are going to access your project come from a wide group of people, and there are safeguarding issues with putting all those individuals in one place. So you wouldn't want to put, for example, people who are disabled or people who have mental health issues in the same room as young children. Because then, well, you might want to, but then I want to see that you've got safeguarding in place to safeguard all those different cohorts of individuals. Yes, so it's easier for you to do virtual workshops. I get that as an appraiser, but I want to make sure that you get why you're delivering it virtually and why you're not delivering it in person. And I also want to see that it's more effective if you do deliver it virtually, as opposed to. And these are questions you should have an answer to ahead of time. So every action you take, you should be able to answer the why are you doing it this way question. Because if you do that, you have preempted the appraiser from asking that question. And if he sees that answer, he's going to go, yeah, that's great, good, okay, I like that. I like that paragraph, great, next paragraph. Oh, I like that paragraph. By the time he's about a third, he or she is about a third the way through your application form, they are feeling warmer about you because you have opened up answering the questions they want to see answered and the questions they would ask. And once you've done that, they're much warmer to you as an applicant than they are to someone who hasn't done that. So right from the beginning, you want to, every time you say we're going to deliver workshops, why are we going to deliver workshops this way? Where are we going to deliver them? Why are we going to deliver them there? If you're delivering them virtually, is the user group for those workshops, are they all online? Have they all got access to internet? If not, are you going to ameliorate that by providing them maybe with hardware or equipment? These are the kinds of things that an appraiser is going to ask. The last piece, I'm conscious of the time here, the last piece that you want to consider, well, not the last, but the second to last piece is the outcomes that you're going to deliver. And this is where you can expand your funding. So if we go back to that playground, a playground, you might want to build a playground because there is no space for your children to exercise in your community. But as we've said, that playground delivers a lot more than just space for the children. It delivers better mental health for those children within the community. It delivers better physical health. And these are outcomes. It delivers, because it delivers better mental health for young children, it can also deliver better educational attainment for young children. Those children who have better mental health, who have access to open space, there is evidence that suggests that those children who have access to recreation and leisure space have much better mental health, and because their health is better, they do better in school than children who do not have open space in which to spend their recreational time. There's absolute concrete evidence that shows that. So now you've got a project that you want to build for your community because you want to build it so they've got recreational space, but now you've got potential funding streams around mental health, you've got potential funding streams around physical health, and you've got potential funding stream about education. So now you can start to, as you start to look for funding streams, you start to think, oh look, here's a funding stream that is for mental health. Well, my project is going to deliver better mental health for young children. So I'm going to go have a look at that project, and if one of the things, or that funder, and if one of the things they're looking for is an increase in mental health in young children, you can go, great, I can do that. A prime example of this is Sport England. Sport England, as many of you no doubt know, used to fund playing fields and cricket pavilions and all that sort of stuff. And they would fund you to build a playing field. But actually, if you look at what Sport England want to achieve now, they want to achieve better mental health in young children, better physical health in young children, anti-obesity programs in actually adults and children. They want to deliver better educational attainment. They want to deliver more access to training opportunities for young adults, for example. They're still building playing fields. They're still building cricket pavilions, but those are the tools that they are suggesting you use in order to deliver those outcomes. So the playground becomes a tool to deliver specific outcomes. And once you think like that and you start to explore in depth, what is it that happens when we build a playground? You start to open yourself up to these new funding streams. And so now, instead of having a funding stream that is for communities to build playgrounds, for example, you've got 3 or 4 different funding streams you can access with the same project. Because you can access a playing field for children for mental health, for a green space, and in current net zero, there's a drive by local and national government for green space for communities. There's an understanding that green space helps communities. It helps resilience in communities. It helps community cohesion. You've got mental health funding. You say, yes, here's a mental health funder. We can help you deliver that because actually we're going to develop a project that is going to provide our children with and enable our children to have better mental health. We're going to do that by building a playground. Does that make sense? Because that's a real shift in the way that you think about funding. That what your project is a tool that delivers a number of outcomes. And you can evidence those outcomes from national and local government data. You can evidence those outcomes quite easily. And now you've got a project that could have potentially 4, 5, 6 funding streams. Let's take tree planting for a prime example. Tree planting, which is, you know, Norfolk has an ambition to deliver 1 million trees across Norfolk in the next 10 years. Great. So when I was working with projects, my first question is, great, tree planting. Who's going to plant the trees? Well, communities are going to plant the trees. Okay. What skills do they need? Well, they'll need to learn how to plant trees. Great. So now, out of tree planting, I've got a potential skills project. Okay. If I've got a potential skills project, do I have the potential to develop or to encourage and enable people to access apprenticeships or training in arboriculture? Okay, so now I've got an apprenticeship and training program. So I'm still planting trees, but I'm planting trees because actually I can deliver a training program, which is what I want to do for my community because there are high levels of unemployment in my community. And actually green skills are one of the key things that are going to be coming up in the green economy. So now I've got a skills project. But tree planting also delivers, just like your playground does, it delivers better mental health. So now I can apply for mental health funding because by developing the skills that plant my trees, I'm creating better mental health. The other thing is, by the way, people who move from unemployment into employment see an uptick in their health and well-being that you can evidence right across the board. So now you've got mental health funding. All out of tree planting so far. You've got skills project, you've got tree planting project. The other piece is who maintains the trees in the long run? Yeah, well, that's the big issue with tree planting. It's all very well to plant 1 million trees. What happens 10 years from now when there are 1 million trees that are 10 years old? Okay, so now you really do need arboriculturists and tree surgeons to actually work on that. So maybe one of the things we want to do is open up opportunities for our young people right now to learn the education, to learn the training that they're going to need in order to supplant the tree. So now I've got a young person's educational project out of my tree planting. So now I've got 4 projects out of tree planting in its entirety. I've also got the environmental, obviously, project because planting trees is benefit for net zero and carbon reduction because they're carbon sinks. So now I've got, and on top of all of those now, I've got environment funding. So, you know, the local nature recovery scheme and all those environment schemes. So now as a person who's trying to fund tree planting, I'm now looking for 6 or 7 different kinds of funders, all out of a tree planting piece. And once you start to realize you can do that, it opens up all these funding streams that you did not realize that were there. And one of the things I hear very often is, oh, there's not much funding going around. And I'm going to say right now, categorically, there is always funding. The question is does your project fit those funding streams? And if you open up the way you think about what the outcomes that your project is going to deliver, you now have access to more funding streams. You can also, by the way, if we go back to tree planting, you can also use one aspect of your project. So let's say you're planting trees and you're going to build a skills program out of planting trees, but you've also got a mental health outcome, but it's the same project. So you could actually go to two funders and fund the skills piece from one funder and fund the mental health outcome from another funder. So now you've got two funders for the same project. You cannot duplicate the work. You might want to offer workshops, for example, to the skills piece, and that's the piece that the skills funder will fund. But you might find that working in open air is the mental health piece, and that will be funded by a mental health funder. But you can use one as match funding against the other. As long as they're not from the same funder, everyone does that. So now, not only have you got 6 different funding streams, but you've got 6 different funding streams that you could potentially use to fund one project. The outcomes for each funder are different. In order to deliver the outcomes, you need to be able to measure. This is my final piece. You need to be able to measure the outcomes. And in order to do that, you need to, I don't know how many of you know what a theory of change is, but a theory of change, just at its very heart, and there's been hundreds of pages written about theory of change, is what is happening now, what are you going to deliver, and what happens as a result of what you're going to deliver. That's basically a theory of change. So in order to show that you are delivering the outcomes and you have been successful, you need to start at the beginning of that theory of change, no matter what your project, and show what is happening now within that user group that is going to use your facility, or you're going to plant your trees. Who else is doing something around it that's not working, for example, that doesn't deliver the outcomes that you're looking for? Then you move into, this is the actions, and then you're going to move, these are the outcomes. And we can measure these outcomes because we have communicated with that user group right at the beginning. We have then done a survey of them, for example, halfway through the project, to show that the progress is being made. The customer journey, if you like, if you're in retail, what is the customer journey? And I would encourage you all, if you're working with groups of individuals and your project is to support, and I presume most of your projects are around social issues within your communities to support groups of individuals, what is the journey that those individuals take from before they start your project, when they engage with your project, and what happens after it? And I would absolutely have in that folder that we talked about at the beginning, a diagram of what that customer journey is. Because by doing that, you can provide measurements at each stage to show progress. That's your monitoring. All funders are going to ask you for monitoring reports when they give you the funding. That's your monitoring. They might ask you, how are you going to monitor progress? We're going to monitor progress because we have drafted, oh, look, Mr. Funder, here you go. Here's our customer journey, and we're going to monitor through a survey at this, and this stage, and at the end. So now I've got an outcome that I can measure the results of, leading up to, and the impact of. And I can do all that through data. I can do all that through saying 45% of those people who we engaged with actually started the project. Of those, we did a survey, and 95% of them said that this project was worthwhile and it was helping their mental health. 2/3 the way through, 95% of them still said it was helping their mental health. And when we finished, 55% of them found employment. That's your customer journey right there. And your customer journey shows where you need to get all the evidence and where you need to have need and demand. So if you do that customer journey as part of your project development prior to it, you'll have that embedded in your application form. And the last thing is you will need a sustainability strategy. And by sustainability, that's an exit strategy. What happens when the funding runs out? That's what this is not sustainability in the environmental sense. This is sustainability of your project. What happens when the funding runs out? When this funding is complete, parents will be donating, £5 a week to support the maintenance of the playground, for example. That's a sustainable exit strategy, because it shows that you won't need the funding beyond that period of time. So I know this has been a quick rundown. Usually I do this over a 5-week course. I'm just going to say this now. It's 15 hours over a 5-week course. And I'm happy to send to Peter Strange details of the next bid writing workshop that we offer. And you're all very welcome to come and join it. It's free. We provide it to all sorts of groups, individuals, and our internal departments, and it's a good way of networking. So that's my final piece. I'm doing my little pitch there, because I also have outcomes and targets to meet, I have to say. So
thank you
hopefully this has been useful, and we can open up to chat. I have not seen I can see the chat.
Yeah, don't worry, I've been keeping an eye on it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say thank you very much. You've covered a terrific amount, and I will say to everybody, it's a question that has been raised with me in the chat, that because there's so much, we will be making Graham's original presentation available, which will have his contact details. And one of the things that Graham and I have already been discussing is whether we have some follow-ups, which could go into more detail in some of these areas if there's an appetite for that amongst people here or amongst other people. So if you could let me know, you can send it by email, you can send me a message in the chat now, if there's anything that you would particularly like to hear a little bit more about. But in the meantime, we will go back to the chat, although there was only the one question at the moment raised in the chat, which is Michael, who offered a counter example of what happens if you get it wrong. Michael, I don't know if you want to explain.
Yeah, let me. Oh well, what you mean? What happens if you get?
Actually, Graham, what I was getting at was more, what are the consequences of not doing it? So I'd like to build a playground to help mental health, but actually if we have no playgrounds, then we have poor mental health, and, this is how it goes wrong.
Yes, well, you should have that. You should, when you baseline, we talked about baselining. One of the things that that you should be doing, and this is part of your rationale, isn't it, as well? If we don't do this, this is what happens. That should be part of your application, and they might actually ask you that. Some funders actually ask you that. That's like an options analysis, and that's one of the advanced sort of workshops that I run, is on an options analysis. If we did not build a playground, our rates of obesity in our community will keep growing. That's one of the reasons why you're doing this. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah, that's perfect. While I've got the mic, can I just say one thing? This has been a fantastic presentation, Graham. So thanks so much for doing it. I think you've done phenomenally well with no notes and, and bad luck just before you joined us. So well done.
I was tearing my hair out 5 minutes before this. And luckily, I have this home studio that's just behind my house. And I've got a personal laptop here. And on that, I managed to Google Pete Strange at Norfolk ALC, and it came up with his phone number, and I was able to call him, and he could send me the link into my personal email address. So,
I do have to say, when I spoke to Graham earlier today, he had a full head of hair, so you can the level of angst it's caused him this evening. Oh, we've got a few more.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
in the chat. Mary has asked that she's actually done a lot of what you said. She's got a folder with headings and the collected evidence, but that she's put in 11 applications and not a single one has asked the same questions. I suppose, is there any guidance you can give people on what are the sort of generic areas that it's most valuable to collect evidence in?
I think, and actually, Mary, I tell you what, I'd be happy to have if you want to send me some stuff, the kinds of applications you sent in, I'm happy to act as a critical friend. And work through a couple of them with you, on a one-to-one basis. I'm happy to do that with everybody, actually, on a one-to-one basis, and say, this is what is wrong with your application forms.
Okay.
And this is what you've done right.
Okay, moving on. Julia's asked about, whether you can suggest funding providers who we can apply to. But presumably that's so open-ended that you need to have some idea of what people might be thinking in terms of potential projects.
What kinds of things do you want to do, Julie? That's the question. Because funders used to fund organizations. They used to fund organizations and their core stuff. Funders now fund outcomes. So what you want to find is funders who fund those specific outcomes. Again, that's something I'm happy to help you guys with. It's something I do in my day-to-day work, is what funding is out there. I have a newsletter. Here's another pitch. I have a newsletter that goes out to about 1,500 people, comes out once a month, and it's got a bit of a piece in the, I discuss some of the stuff we've talked about today. I think the next one, for example, there's about a page that I'm talking about social enterprises. Car park. I tell you one thing, there's an issue with a car park. Doesn't meet net zero anti-fossil fuel requirements unless your car park, you sign up you sign up for the newsletter by emailing me, and Pete will, and I'll provide you, I'm on leave till Tuesday, but Pete, I'm happy if you provide them my email address. It's funding at norfolk.gov.uk in general. The issue with car parks across the board is that you need to build in electric vehicle infrastructure into car parks, and ideally, because car parks are just another facility for fossil fueled vehicles, and a lot of funders are trying not to fund those kinds of projects. So, but if your car park is primarily targeted towards electric vehicles and or community transport, and there is a park and ride, and there is transport from the park and ride to your playground or whatever, then that goes well nicely. Mm. Car parks are difficult to fund in this current era.
Yeah. Okay, just moving on quickly because I'm conscious of time. Becky has asked whether, as an appraiser, you would expect the same level of detail for a £10,000 application as a £50,000 application.
No, I would not. I would absolutely not. I might ask some of the same questions about, especially about the whys and the what, but I'm not going to go into your budget in as great detail. I'm not going to go into your monitoring reports in as great detail. It's a £10,000 project. You might do. I might want to see one monitoring report in a period of 6 months or a year on a £1 million project, and I do a lot of multi-million-pound project appraisals. Then I want to see real detail. So no, I think a small project, you still need it. It still needs to be data and evidence based, but it doesn't need to be so comprehensive.
Okay, good. And is that generally the case, you think, with other?
Absolutely is. Absolutely. We run ourselves. We run, Norfolk County Council. We run a number of grant funding streams, and the ones that are £20,000 or less are really simple application forms. It doesn't mean that even though we don't want to see the same level of detail, it does not mean that the appraisers are not as ruthless. They're just not as ruthless about the level of detail, but they do want to see that you've got evidence to back up. As a basics, every time you make a statement, an allegation, or you have an action, you need to back that up with evidence that shows you can deliver it. The key thing, appraisers across the board, 100% of funders are looking for two things. They're looking for deliverability and they're looking for budget. Beyond that, it gets very flexible. And the whole point of today was that if you start off at the beginning, enabling the appraiser to move into a mindset where they feel that you can deliver, you are more likely to get funded than an applicant who doesn't give them that warm and cuddly feeling across the board. I see we've got 19 things going. It went from 5 to 19, the chat.
Yeah. I wonder whether Becky's asked about a project that they're perhaps looking to deliver in stages. Now, if you're applying for a funding to a stage, would you look to describe the whole project or just the individual? Getting quite specific.
Mostly, especially for the smaller funders, they just want to know what it is that you're doing. They don't need the rest of the detail. They won't want a lot of evidence or detail. They might want to know why you're doing this. Why are you doing this? Okay, here's some evidence there. They won't want details. They will want to know, what is it you're doing? They'll want to know, what does success look like? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And how are you going to solve it? That's all they're interested in at stage 1. Stage 2 gets much more complex.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we would largely come to the end. I mean, Julia's made an observation, a further observation about her.
Yeah, absolutely. And Julia, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about how we can make that more attractive for funders, even with no electric and no EV charging infrastructure.
I mean, I would say that from my point of view, from what I picked up from you, Graham, I think you're on the right lines in terms of trying to think a little bit laterally about what the potential outcomes might be. I think sometimes we get a bit stuck on, oh, we want to build a playground, so therefore it's about building a playground, without thinking more broadly about what the potential outcomes might be of that.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, because a playground is a tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a means to an end, not an end in itself. Yeah. We haven't got any more in the.
If I might, Peter, if I can just respond to, because there's a number of things about the car parks there.
Yeah.
What the key question out of that, Julie, and also Stella, is: does your car park alleviate that issue of cars parked on the main road with lorries and buses? That's the key question that comes out of it. When you say to me, we want a car park because there's cars parked on the main road with busy lorries and buses, they cause danger to children attending school. Great, I get that. How does a car park change that? Because you still got cars parked on the main road, unless the car park is substantial enough to cover all of that, in which case, what are you going to do about parking on the main road? Because your problem is not a car park. Your problem is the cars parked on the main road. So the question is, how do you solve that issue? I'm very happy to have discussions about looking at ways that that issue can be resolved. And that might include a car park. We just have to frame that car park in the right way so that a funder looks at it and goes, ah, right, I can see that this is the solution to that problem. And it's the same with Stella. Happy to have one-on-one conversations. Just email me. I've got a lot of leave coming up over the next month, but yeah, we can always work something out. Yeah,
and I mean, a lot of these things are long term. It's not, there's no 1 week, 2 week solutions. I think you've got to be in this for the long run. Right, as we haven't got much else in the chat. Oh, hold on. Yep.
Yeah, you can have other road traffic measures, cycle and walking pathways. I'm just going to tell you this now. Cycle and walking pathways, especially that are linked to heavily trafficked roads, are very, very fundable at the moment. There is a big drive and lots of funding going into cycle and walking pathways. So maybe the answer is to have a car park, but also build a cycle and walking pathway so people do not have to bring their cars down that road into your car park. And cycle and walking pathways have a massive amount of funding at the moment.
Excellent. Well, so I was going to say, perhaps I could just throw the floor open more generally. If anybody wants to ask questions directly to Graham, not through the chat, or share some of their experience or things that worked, or cautionary things that haven't worked.
Yep. 89 iPad, Michael Skipper, I think that says.
Yep.
You're on mute, Michael.
How's that?
Yes, that's better.
You're in now. We can hear you, Michael.
Just to clarify, I'm the chairman of the car park committee for my sins, and the car park that Julie is talking about at the moment, the school is beside the road, which has got a grain store at the end of it. This is the road I'm talking about, and other businesses. 60 cars come to the school to drop off their children in the morning and in the evening. Opposite the school, there's a very, very good playground which was created by the ladies on our parish council. And so our car park would serve the school, which has 103 pupils, and serve the playing field, which sometimes has got 40 children playing on it when they're not at school. And we would be getting the cars off the road onto a car park, and so other traffic can travel through without obstruction, and improve the safety of the children trying to get to the school and the car park.
So,
and the playground.
And I get that. So is the car park at the beginning of that road, if you like, not adjacent to the school or the playground?
It's on the other side of the road to the school, on a piece of land we are able to lease.
So does the car park then stop cars coming down in between the school and the playground?
No, the road coming to the school would be coming to the car park, but they would then be off the road instead of being on the road, which they currently are at the moment when they're dropping off children.
Right, and I know drop-off points for schools are just, I mean, I've got one right outside my house, which just gets crazy somewhere in the morning. And not to dismiss the drivability of a lot of those people, but if there was ever going to be a place for accidents, it's outside schools. But yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation. I think a car park, it can work. We have to frame it in the right way, and I think you'll need to build in other stuff beside the car park. I think you'll need to have stuff that encourages people not to come with cars down that road, in effect.
This is a school in a rural area, and some of the children come 5 miles.
I understand that. I understand that. And I don't know enough about it, but I'm happy to have a discussion with you and go research about it and do some stuff. You know, and sometimes it might be as simple as actually building community transport. There's a whole range of things. You know, you can traffic calming measures, for example, opposite the school and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you try highways, mate.
I'm sorry?
No, we've already got a traffic signs outside the school to reduce the speed. It is a main thoroughfare for a bus route and lorries.
We've had massive trouble with highways. We've had highways out about 20 times, and they just say they can't do anything else. They won't put yellow lines down and everything else. So,
yeah, in that case, you haven't got much choice, but I think you need to frame it in a different way. I think you need to frame it.
We've got a commercial grain store about a mile down the road with 39-ton lorries, articulated lorries bringing grain in and out most of the time. And the beauty of our car park is it would serve the playground as well. And sometimes these lorries can't get through. Sometimes the parents can't back up. But if they were on the car park, it would alleviate all of that, you see, and that is why we think the car park is so essential.
And it could well be. I still think you need to frame it differently. You could frame it as an anti-pollution measure for a start, as well as a health and safety measure. You know, if you're reducing the number of cars that are coming outside the school, you're reducing pollution out. There's a number of ways of framing transport issues that are not about the transport itself, but what happens as a result of all those vehicles coming down the road. And that's the piece you need to work. Again, the car park becomes a tool that delivers better health for young children in that area. You know, have you measured the pollution around the school by chance?
We know how many vehicles park outside the school, but in measurements of the actual pollution itself, I'm not quite sure how we'd do that. Well,
you could ask, if you ask me, I'll put you in touch with our, you know, we've got a whole team that does that kind of thing. And actually, if you did that, you might be able to build in an educational piece about the young children monitoring pollution in their area using, they've got some very simple to use way of measuring pollution in an area that actually they provide to schools, so schools can measure their pollution, but also teach children about carbon reduction in the environment and all that kind of stuff. If you measure the pollution outside your school, and then you say, actually, we want to reduce that pollution level because there's an absolute well-known direct link between pollution and the mental health of young children, and therefore their attainment in school. So if we build the car park, we will reduce the pollution and then increase the potential attainment of children in the school. So the car park becomes that tool that delivers not only less easier routes in, but also delivers a number of other outcomes. And then you can start to, I'm sorry.
As we all know, when an articulated lorry, which is laden with grain, has to go from a standing start outside of school, 45 tons, we all know there'll be some pollution, don't we?
Absolutely. And so that's the issue your car park is solving. And so in order to get the car park, I'm happy to introduce you to the team that does that, is to measure the pollution right outside the school and the playground, use that as a baseline and say, we'd like to see this come down. And the way we want to see this come down is we'll put a car park in. And if we do that, the mental health and the physical health of children walking down that road will be better.
Yeah.
Great, that's great, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Do
I'm happy to help you with
the
that.
local children in the village already have a walking bus, so teachers go and meet them at the end of the village and walk them in. But we do have people travel, you know, from all over the other villages because it's such a popular school.
And now that you've explained it, I get it. So what we need to do is find the rationale for the car park.
Excellent advice. We'll be in touch about the environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else like to chip in? Or
and I'm just going to say, anti-pollution stuff is also one of those things that's very fundable at the moment.
Yeah, and I would chip in actually. I know that Norfolk at the moment is looking to put in a large bid. I can't remember exactly which department it is, for the installation of electric vehicle charging points.
Yeah, that's us. That's growth and development.
Yeah, so they are looking for locations for bringing more electric vehicle charging points. So that's something.
And actually, you don't need electricity. You don't need grid connections because it can be done through things like solar panels.
Mm-hmm. And if anybody wants any more information, I can put you in touch with. I'm sure Graham can put you in touch with the people who are leading on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I sit right next to them most of the time when I'm in County Hall. But while we're just on that, if you build a car park and you use, solar panels to support a electric vehicle charging installation, you can also, depending on the size, you can also feed the excess back into a grid connection and thereby get an income. There's a village in the Midlands, the name of which I forget, that has installed solar-powered LED lighting down its whole main street. And those solar panels generate more energy than the lighting uses, and they feed that back into the grid, and they get an income back from the grid. That feed tariff has come down dramatically, but it's still,
it's not as good now as it used to be.
No, absolutely not. But it will go up again at some point because there's an understanding that renewables are the way forward.
Good. Right. Well, I don't see any hands up, so I mean, all it leaves for me now is to say thank you very much again, Graham, for a fascinating and information-laden session tonight. As I said, we'll make as much information as available as possible, either through our website or through our YouTube channel. If anybody has any ideas of further webinars on this subject that they would like Graham or one of his team to deliver, then please let me know or let Graham know, and we'll look to expand that and get as much information as possible. And just say to all of you, thank you so much for attending. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you've taken something away from this that you found useful. And all I say to you is enjoy the rest of your evening.
Indeed, and thank you all very much. And hopefully this has been very useful for you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good night.
All right. Good night.